Test. 1, 2, 3. Test.
Yes,
Sometimes it's like 30
it's
seconds.
unmuted though.
See the green bar going up? When people talk.
Yes. Trying to talk to that's
Oh. Not muted here.
Rob,
Sir.
I was wondering if you could check on something. I don't know who to contact.
Okay, is the audio working in the TV room at all? No. Same.
There, you can hear it on the.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say, can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
How old is that commercial? Does that now date me
Done.
too? Okay.
It's a very.
Good. Okay, we have reached the appointed time. Welcome to the June 26, 2024 meeting of BAR Large here at the Crawcheck Public Meeting Room at number 2 George Street. My name is John Robinson. I'm our chairman for this afternoon and evening. I am accompanied by fellow board members Jay White, who will recuse for item B1, James Metters, Seton Brown, Eddie Bellows sitting with us as alternate. Thank you, Eddie. We also have with us in city staff, BD Wortham Galvin, our city architect, Lawrence Courtney, our staff architect, and Travis Galley, our senior preservation planner. Just some ground rules for this evening. Our applicants were required to submit all material that will be seen tonight, all documents in advance of the meeting by the required deadlines. Staff will control the slide presentation, or do we have the clicker this evening? Unless the applicant wishes to try their luck with the clicker at their own risk.
It shocks you.
That's right. All material that is submitted or will be reviewed tonight has been in accordance with city staff submittal requirements. The applicant simply needs to ask the staff to which slide they would like Lawrence to advance. He will do so, again, unless you're using the clicker yourself. This is a reminder to applicants that be they the architect, developer, lawyer, or other affiliate should identify themselves clearly when they begin to speak during their presentation. This presentation this whole meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the City of Charleston's YouTube channel. Your consent, your presence here is your consent to be recorded and left on the YouTube channel where all of our meetings are saved. The order of the meeting for each applicant's presentation will be as follows. There will first be an introduction and overview of the project by city staff for the benefit of the board and for the public. This is followed by the applicant's presentation, which has a 10-minute time limit unless extended by the applicant at the request of the chair in 5-minute increments. The person affiliated with the project, be they the owner, developer, designer, architect, or consultant, should identify their role and speak during this portion of the meeting rather than the portion that follows, which is public comment. The applicant's presentation is followed by the public period. All applications are part of a public meeting format. Written public comments were due noon yesterday, and if they exist, have been disseminated to the board. They will not be read into the record unless requested by a member of the board and published by the chair. Any member who is present, any member of the public who is present with us this evening is more than welcome to speak with a 2-minute time limit. All that is requested is that you please approach the podium, speak into the microphone, identify yourself by name and your address within the city. The 2-minute time limit may be extended at the election of the chair for members of the public. The applicant should not respond to comments made during the public comment portion. There's a later time to do so. The public comment portion of the meeting is followed by city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant then has a brief 5-minute period to respond or clarify either to anything they wish to address during the public comments portion of the meeting or presentation or the city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant does not need to use the applicant response period if they do not feel it is necessary, and that is encouraged. This is followed by board discussion and a vote on each agenda item. At this point, the applicant's presentation is over. Public comment is closed. The applicant should clarify any inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising their hand. Board members will be polled for the chairperson for comments on any given vote on a motion. I will reread a motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct me if I have not stated it correctly. Once a motion is in proper order and seconded, each member when voting should say yay in favor or nay not in favor for clarity of the record. Results, of course, are published at charleston-sc.gov/BAR. No items have been withdrawn this evening. We've talked about Mr. White's recusal. There was no written public comment. This is a final reminder to please turn off all cell phones and other potentially disruptive devices, and a reminder to the public that due to the law in the state of South Carolina regarding the meeting and jurisdiction of the BAR, comments that are not germane to our proceedings, such as parking, traffic, livability, or lot coverage, should not be addressed here. Please limit your comments to architecture, aesthetics, the context of a neighborhood, height, scale, mass, general architectural direction of the project. And with that, we will proceed into our regular agenda, which is agenda item A1, approval of our meeting minutes from the June 12th meeting of the year.
Move for.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved as published. Agenda item B1, 257, 261 King Street.
Agenda item B1 should be 63
Oh,
Columbus.
I apologize.
It's all right.
If you read off the wrong agenda, that tends to
All
happen.
right.
63 Columbus Street.
We're
Thank you.
having Groundhog Day. That was last time.
We're good.
63 Columbus Street is on the east side. It's not rated. It dates from 1957 in the Old City District. Applicant is requesting a review of a mock-up panel for a support building for the early college high school. Just by way of orientation, this is where said property is located. Now we're ready for the applicant's presentation.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. My name is Jay White, for the record, with Leolio Architecture. I'm here tonight with one of our associates, Sarah Glass, and then Dion Jackson, who is with Contract Construction Company, who built the mock-up. I would just quickly say that we've worked very, very diligent as a group, as a team, to get this mock-up to where it is. We're very happy with it. We hope you all are too. We're here to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from city staff or the board at this time?
I have
Mr.
one-
Bello.
I have one question, Mr. White.
Yes.
I went by and there's a small hole on one of the canopy. Did y'all notice that?
Yes,
Is that
it's a drain.
Is that a drain hole? Okay.
Drains the backside of the gym.
Other questions from the board or staff? To dispense with this, is there any member of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, city staff comments, recommendations.
Staff appreciate the quality of the mock-up panel. Staff note that while it is generally preferred to have window sealant and lintel color and brick walls match the generalized brick mortar blended color instead of the window color, the sealant in this case is very well executed and is acceptable. While projected sunscreen assembly is shown on the mock-up, which incorporates a lintel, it is appropriate that this all be the same color. It is generally staff's position that where no sunscreen assembly exists, the lintel should match the generalized material color above it. There are no staff conditions for approval, and staff recommendation is for approval of the mock-up.
Would anyone on Mr. White's team care to respond to that, since Jay exited himself? Okay, very good. All right, so we move to discussion and vote, or maybe we don't need discussion.
No objection, I move for approval. I thought it was welcome.
Yeah,
Good,
I thought
I've
it
heard good things, and there's a second from Mr. Bello, so it's in proper order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
Yea in favor.
Mr. Bello,
was in favor.
Mr. Matters,
Yea in favor.
myself, yea in favor. Thank you to the applicant. Agenda item B2. 141 Meeting Street demolition.
Yes.
Yeah, this time.
141 Meeting Street is in Charleston Village. The building dates from 1876 to 1878 in the Old and Historic District. Here it is a request for demolition approval of columns, low wall, and eye work, not the building itself. And here again, we're orienting ourselves to the larger site. We are ready for applicant's presentation.
Hello, my name is Ted Irish. I'm an architect with BMOC Hospitality Collection. And the slide is loading, but I think once it loads, you will see that we have some columns that are replication columns put in 1960, we believe. We don't know the exact date. They do not date back to the original E.B. White building that was built in 1876. And we have reason to believe that they were put in 1960 when SCE&G added the parking lot renovation to the site. And we feel they're not contributing to the public realm in any way. We'd like to remove those. We did get demolition approval last fall for the 141 addition. We probably should have included these, but we didn't know at the time. We would need to get final approval on these particular columns so we can make way for the demolition equipment to get into the site for the addition and the Gibbs renovation they're doing right now back in the property. So we are seeking final approval for these elements of the site.
Ted, since it's not loading for whatever reason, although it was on, because what's on there is the color of the columns being kept versus the ones you might just point on the screen
Sure,
behind you,
sure,
just for
sure.
public benefit, which,
So these columns here are the original to the EB White building. We're not touching anything up to this point. This column and this low wall and this column here, this is the 1960 replication columns that we're asking for final approval on. And we're salvaging the ironwork to be put in the new park plan that we can't really talk about. It's on agenda item number 2.
It's duly noted salvaging materials. Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
were there any of the other materials you provided that you wanted Lawrence or yourself to highlight? Because they're in there, but you don't have to. You can forward through them.
I don't think so this time.
I was gonna say, with this demo, everything that's involved is pretty fresh in the memory, I think, of most members of the board, the EB White building, SENG building, and some of the unfortunate additions made to it over time that once we had some information, context, your research, that kind of passed through here, that demolition phase passed through here with flying colors. So I don't think that's an issue. Does the board feel that it needs to see the rest of Mr. Rich's presentation, or do we have some I certainly have confidence based on what he's told us in the past and the research they've done on this very important building. I don't see why this would be any different.
I'm familiar.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, very good. City staff comments and recommendations?
What, but do we need public comments?
Oh, excuse me.
Yes.
Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, and I see it just, I'm sorry.
It's very brief.
Yeah.
Anna Catherine Alexander with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We appreciate the applicant reaching out. We're comfortable with the scope of demolition proposed to facilitate an improved pedestrian experience. And we just wanted to say for the record, we appreciate the applicant's willingness to reuse the existing ironwork on site and just encourage the board to incorporate that into your motion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Good. Any other member of the public wishing to be heard? Seeing none. City staff comments and recommendations. Sorry.
For context and analysis, the two columns in low wall requested for removal date from the late 1950s and are not original to the EB White building as stated by applicant. The iron gates in front of the structure initially stood at the former building site on Church Street and were included by EB White when he designed the structure in the late 1870s. Staff conditions for approval. All deconstruction work is to take into account adjacent or nearby structures and the protection and monitoring thereof. If any foundation work involving significant vibrations such as driven piles may be reasonably suspected to be a threat to historic or new adjacent or nearby structures, a program must be put in place addressing how these structures are to be protected and monitored. A copy of this protection and monitoring plan is to be transmitted to staff for review prior to work. And this is because it's a category 1 building that you're working here. Number 2 condition is the iron gates are required to be salvaged and reused in the American Gardens Park. Staff recommendation is for approval with board and staff conditions.
Very good. Thank you. Any response, Mr. Risch? Board discussion and vote.
I'm very comfortable with the scope of this project and the staff conditions.
Very good.
So I have a question though. On their drawings, they are salvaging the gates and the ironwork that's going across the front. And I think your comments just referenced the gate. Does it matter that
It
we
should
want to
be-
incorporate both,
Yeah,
right?
we want to incorporate them. So you can certainly make that a board condition. We can.
And I have no objection. Mr. Good. Very good. Further discussion, if not a motion.
I'll make a motion for final approval with the condition that the gates and the ironwork be salvaged and incorporated into the park plan that we'll see next.
So that's a motion for final approval for the demolition, including salvaging all the ironwork and gates and other board and staff comments, recommendations.
I'll second.
Second, Mr. White's proper order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Metters? Mr. Bello?
Yeah,
Mr. White? Myself, yea in favor. Passes 5-0. Thank you to the applicant, which brings us right back to agenda item number 3.
Item number 3 is also at the same property, 141 meeting with the building, or I should say the larger site. The buildings include a category 1 and category 3 building. And they are requesting conceptual approval of a new park plan modifications to the existing 174 King Street building, which is the Category 3 building, and addition and modifications to the existing 141 Meeting Street building and Building Link, and that's the Category 1 building. And no aerial necessary because we already just showed where the location of the property is.
Very good. Mr. Rish, you have the floor again.
Hey, again, for the record, my name is Ted Rish. I'm an architect with BMOC Hospitality Collection. And I just wanted to first off ask if we could have an additional 10 minutes for our presentation. If
Sure.
that's okay. Okay. We'll be brief, but we may need that additional 10 minutes. But I wanted to let the board know that on behalf of our company, we're committed to working through all the details with all the stakeholders that may arise moving forward with the project. And I wanted to let you know that we broke down the submittal into kind of 3 different components. So you'll see the garden plan first, presented by Reese Roberts. And then you'll see the 174 King building presented by LS3P. And then the 141 building will be presented by Evans and Schmidt. So with that, I'll turn it over to David Kelly with Reese Roberts.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Kelly. I'm from Reese Roberts and Partners. I am the lead designer for the landscape component of the park. And if we could have the next slide. The park, when we first started working with the park, we looked at a lot of gardens from the United States. We looked at a lot of gardens from in Europe, and we wanted to really create a beautiful space that kind of knitted kind of that area to both Meeting and King Streets, and kind of look at the fabric of Charleston and kind of create a beautiful place that people could come to. They could sit under the shade in park benches. And so we looked at like Bryant Park in New York and places like that. So to kind of create, even though we don't have the scale of those parks, we wanted to look at how those parks functioned and how great parks work. And so we wanted to just create a really beautiful space. And if I could have the next slide. This basically just shows you the building on King Street and the building on Meeting Street. This obviously gets demolished. And this is that bank building here. So the park essentially exists all between that. And in a sense, the park holds those 2 buildings together. And it's kind of the landscape. It's the landscape in between the 2 buildings. And then if I could have the next slide. These are more about the building, which we could keep going. This, yeah, that's the building over here. And this then shows 2 buildings to be demolished. So these are images just of different parks that we started to look at. This is Bryant Park in New York. We can click through these slides in a timely manner so that we don't keep you forever. The idea of this beautiful lawn in the center of the city. I think we really wanted to think about this green space that was cool and lush and kind of a place you wanted to go to when it was hot. This is the Tuileries in France, looking at different ways that you could connect the garden. We looked at the cemetery walk. That was a big one for us. And the cemetery walk, when it gets kind of to the library, it starts to break apart a little bit. And so we thought of this garden as kind of a way that it could bring you across and connect up. Because I in particular was fascinated about, the different ways that you can kind of slip through the city in the opposite direction to Meeting and King. And so we wanted to look at the park as that as well, like a way to go between it, so that say you had a meeting, you could use this in that way. Or you could slip into the park and, meet your friend or have lunch or, get a sandwich and sit in the park. So also the introduction of water, which is in the plan, something that's very tranquil, something beautiful in the city. It helps to kind of, bring down the kind of the noise of traffic, a beautiful contemplative place. So I think what I'm saying is we're really thinking about beautiful experiences for people in the city. And I think that's what makes great urban parks at any scale. It doesn't have to be Bryant Park or Central Park, they all work. And then this just is a map showing the various ways that you can slip kind of, or slip through the city in you know, opposite direction to King and Meeting. So there's like the cemetery walk, there's the historic city tour, there's the garden tour. So there's a lot of different ways. So our park, which is here, can really be another addition to that, and you can kind of slice through the city in that direction. And then on the next slide. So that takes us to the park design. This is the Gibbs Annex here. This is the 174 King Street building. And so the park is, and you've probably looked at all of this, but the park is broken down into 3 main elements, which one is the alley, which runs through between Meeting and King, or King and Meeting. And that is an alley all the way through of very large, over 30-foot crepe myrtle alleys, and they're actually going in at that size. I saw them yesterday, actually. So that runs through this, and so that really creates a beautiful canopy that you move through, shady, and then there's basically low understory plantings with benches tucked in there, so you could, you know, meet a friend, have lunch, that kind of stuff. So across this whole thing. The center of the park is the Great Lawn, which is flanked on either side with 8 beautiful oak trees, which are also been picked out, and they're very large, so you can get under them already. And then that's a beautiful lawn, and that can function as a beautiful place with the sort of like if anybody's been to Bryant Park, that beautiful lawn in the center with the chairs, and you can have lunch and meet your friend and read a book, or, you know, there could be a jazz quartet there or something like that. So that's the Great Lawn. And then bookending the Great Lawn are the 2 fountain, this is the crescendo, is the 2 fountain plazas. So there's 2 beautiful, much more classical in style fountains. The park is actually very classical in design. We thought that fits really well with, you know, it is in Charleston. And so the fountain plazas are flanked by crepe myrtles as well, the fountain in the center, and then each of the fountain plazas would be where we would have seasonally changing out beautiful planting. So there would be more color in those areas, and that would be the wow factor area. So these renderings basically take you through the various components. This sort of shows the fountain plaza. The idea is also just to bring the scale down, particularly of those 2 parking structures that are opposite to the Gibbs, so that, you know, when you're in the park, the parking structures are more minimized. You know, looking at the Great Lawn. And the wonderful thing is that these renderings are actually really depicting the plantings at the scale they'll go in. This is not something that, you know, we're going to be waiting 20 years for. So the fountain, this looking back at the Gibbs building, the Fountain Plaza. Just looking at evidence for fountains, the idea of having something elegant but classical. I think we thought a lot about lighting at nighttime so that the park feels very inviting at night. Keeping it residential in feeling, but, you know, obviously you want to make it, you know, safe, and, you know, if someone's there at night, they don't feel unsafe. And then, so bringing us to the gates, we started looking at gate designs, and so myself and several team members went around Charleston, particularly in the area, and started looking at gate designs that are in that vicinity, up the road, around the corner, you know, looking at what was the context, what did the gates look like in that area, you know, what they might look historically, you know, the idea of columns, you know, gate designs, things like that. Next slide. The idea of columns with, you know, with beautiful limestone caps, you know, perhaps a beautiful crest for the American Gardens. And then finally, I think we have the gate designs as they stand. So this would be the gate and fence design along Meeting Street. This being the E.B. White gate and column, so that's not changing. Those are existing. This is the new one. So basically there's 2 columns. This is the gate to the park. This would be, for the most part, open. And then essentially there are two inlaid, there's a piece at the bottom, which would be these would be painted brick, and then beautiful ironwork with this kind of filigreed crisscross pattern at the bottom, which also mirrors itself in the gates that open. This would be the King Street side here, which the gates are all the same at the entry points. There's one entry point on Meeting Street. This is King Street, and then the opposite side of King Street. So they all play with each other. We thought the park would be nice if it had one gate design that fit in each of them, as opposed to different gate designs all across it. And as we looked around at the various gates in the neighborhood, these felt very much in keeping with the style of the other gates up King Street, up Meeting, and some of the cross streets. This gate we'll get to a little bit further in the presentation when we get to the Gibbs building. This is actually set quite far back and is actually part of the Gibbs building. And that we'll bring up later, and you'll be able to understand it more. It's you go down the alleyway and it's actually set back, and the skywalk goes over this. So yeah, so just to repeat, Meeting, King, and then this is at the Gibbs building. And I think I didn't talk too much, but there we go. That is the landscape portion of the park, which holds the two buildings together.
Very good.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Sorry.
Questions for this phase of
Sure, once
landscape?
in a
Yes.
while, so is this gonna be presented and voted on? Because there's three very different projects. I know, I get that they're all together, obviously, but I feel like we ought to discuss this and vote, and then talk about the other one and vote. And just asking, is that not how it's gonna happen?
No, we're gonna vote on them as a whole, but I would agree that under the circumstances, if we want to have a discussion or questions the applicant on this phase of some merit, I think that's fine, but just not vote.
But motions and voting should happen at the very end, but
Yeah.
questions and discussion can happen with each phase.
Okay.
Is that would you?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, this is very different from what happened at 174. King,
We
is what I'm
agree.
saying, so. Well, is it time for questions?
Yeah, it's time for questions.
And I won't get into, I think it's great.
By the way, the applicant's time has stopped. It's not being held against you. Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry, yes, I'm not taking up your time. One question about the north edge. I think you showed edges there. The side that fronts the terrible garage and the not so great office building. How is that handled? Yeah, I think when you're in there, you don't want to see that stuff. And is it going to be a hedge?
There's a hedge, yeah.
Okay.
There's basically an 8-foot hedge there's basically an 8-foot hedge that runs around the entire park.
Okay.
So that, and then you have the crepe myrtles inside of that, and then under the crepe myrtles, you have all the plantings.
Okay.
So you kind of have a layering to all of them. So
If you go to like.
It's a green
slide
ball.
15.
And
or
then
sheet
the
15.
next question. So you didn't talk about what the surface material is. Is it like a museum mix or is it? pavers, or what is happening there?
so we have lawn, obviously.
That, yeah.
We have a paver, which is a cobble. It's actually a concrete paver, but it's made to look like a cobble. We actually had it custom made. It's tumbled, it's pervious, and it's ADA.
Okay.
It works with ADA, so you can get a wheelchair over.
So
it.
in that view, that would be a cobble?
Well, so
That's what
please
I was
take the renderings with a grain of salt, because the renderings have happened over the course of a period of time, and we've been updating things and working with materials and all that kind of stuff. So essentially what we now have is we have this cobble in most locations because of ADA requirements. There are tracks up the alley though that are done in this pervious gravel.
Yeah, like
which is like a
giant
Kafka
art.
mix, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah. So we've been working on, for drainage and for ADA, this was kind of, we had to, the gravel didn't work with the drainage but it worked with the ADA, several things that we've been working with to get to something that will work with both ADA and permeability. I mean, Whitner from Seaman Whiteside certainly can speak to this more because she is the one that has been
Yes.
working like a mad person on this, but anyways, yes, so
Okay.
it's essentially, yes, beautiful tumbled pavers with gravel inlays on the alley.
Thank you. That's-
Mr. Members?
No, I mean, that's the hedge, right? That you can see.
Yeah, I see it.
It runs basically around the entire parks.
Good, okay, very good. Other questions or commentary from the board at this time? This phase?
Sounds like you've decided on crepe myrtles for
I'm
the
sorry?
LA. Crepe myrtles for the LA.
Yes.
You might love their crepe myrtles, don't they? I think that's at the entrance of Charleston Place as well. So when the crepe myrtles are dead in the off season, what's the view? What's the landscape going to look like?
I personally, I can't speak for anyone, I just have to speak for myself, really love crepe myrtles when they don't have their leaves. I think the bark, that copper gold color, you know, the kind of beautiful way that they kind of like twist and turn is really beautiful. I think what makes them so special and unique is that they're deciduous. They do lose their leaves, you know, they do have they have a seasonality to them, but they also have, you know, that peeling bark, they flower, they kind of do everything, which is kind of what, you know, what makes them so amazing is that they flower, they have beautiful bark, they are seasonal, and they're also, they are very, how do I say that delicately, they're tough. They're survivors, so, you know, you don't, you know, they, you know, they survive. And I find them to be a very beautiful, elegant, and they make a really nice LA, and they can take shade as well.
And
Yeah, they
live oak?
don't close.
And these
the
are
thing
single
in.
trunk grapes, right? They're the single, whatever it's called, it's not this multi, it's.
No, they're
Oh,
multi-stem.
they are.
Yeah, the ones we're doing are multi-stem.
Okay, but they're that big.
And you said at installation, they would be approximately 30 feet tall?
Hey, yeah, yep.
Wow.
And live oaks or water oaks or what kind of oaks?
Pardon?
What kind of oaks?
So they're live oaks. Yeah. Like you see everywhere else, like that's all down Meeting Street essentially. We wanted to get oaks as big as Meeting Street, but you can't get them. The oaks that we're getting are the biggest ones we can get down the street. So we want that to feel really, we're trying to make the park feel as much like it's been there forever as we possibly can, obviously, without, you know, within reason.
Thank you.
Further questions, comment at this time on this phase? Okay.
Nope.
Next
All
phase?
right, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yep.
All right, my name is David Burt. I'm with LS3P, 205.5 King Street. We're now going to talk about 174 King. As BD alluded to, this is a category 3 building. It's lived many lives. As best we can tell, this building was constructed around 1850. And it's ironic, its original use was called Mount Vernon. And it was used as a little cafe, like a little ice cream shop, which is ironic because we're trying to put it back into use as a similar function. And back then, the fact that Mount Vernon was what it was named after, which was obviously credit to George Washington, and we're going to be celebrating this as a park on the 250th anniversary of our country from 1776. So all of it seems to be making full circle. It's lived numerous lives. We know there was a fire in 1863, somewhere in there. And this building did get burned, but we don't think it was burned completely down. We think just the inside was burned, a lot of the bones, or it was reconstructed just as it was. Since then, in the last life of this building, we know that it was an undergarments facility. They were building them upstairs. I'm not going to say what kind of sweatshop type thing they were doing, but whatever, that's what it was. And you can tell, and then right prior or just prior to us getting it, it was Dominion Energy's building, and they were using it as for communications back and forth with Columbia. So it's all boarded up on the inside with fully insulated panels. It's like a soundproof room that they were using the upstairs for. So some of the windows and walls, some of the windows were covered up. And we've now discovered that some of those were penetrations. So that's some of the things we're trying to look through in this building. So now, today's use, it's gonna supplement the park. It's intended, and you can go to the next one or I'll go. So there it is up on King Street. These are some of the elevations of the building. This is the side facing King Street. This is the unfortunate southern view that has that metal stair on the exterior of it that was clearly added on. And then the backside view here. We do think there might have been an opening there, but it's hard to tell. Again, that room upstairs is completely cladded in. So as soon as we start doing some deconstruction, we'll be able to tell a little bit more about it. This is what what we're proposing for the building. The top is the existing condition. The middle is the demolition and the bottom is the proposed floor plan. The idea is that the building, as its function, the dining portion will have these little French doors that are where the existing openings are. We'll put them into French doors facing that park. That fountain is right here. This kitchen will also have a little serving window on the side and access to the dining there. The door that's here, we're going to reuse and make that into the entrance to public bathroom facilities for the park users. And then we have storage. We're moving the stair to the inside with a back door that gets you up to the upstairs. And I guess I'll go there. Second floor, again, existing, demo proposed. You come up to the second floor, we have the park offices up here. And this conference center, bridal suite, whatever it's being used for, again, has those views out to the park. We did incorporate a couple of balconies, strategically, one covering those French doors on below. And here, this is actually protecting the transaction window for the cafe itself. And then we have some public restrooms up there. The roof, we're backing the equipment up as far as we can. This is just a section through it. Again, the proposed elevation, it's existing, demo proposed. We did walk around a lot of the buildings in this area on the back side of the buildings. They do have these balconies. I wish I'd have put that in this presentation, but it's very common to have these like French Juliet looking balconies literally across the street on King Street. The building that if you're at the front of this building, look across the back side has those balconies. So again, now on this north side, I do know for preservation purposes, if we could reduce the number of openings, that is a concern. We were told that it was a concern and even brought it up with Historic Charleston, the Preservation Society. It's possible that we could lose some of these windows if we need to. So we wanted to show you the design that would achieve the best outcome for our purposes. But if there is some concern about the number of openings, we can revisit those with you. This is the south elevation. I would say the elevation that's going to become the most active of all of the elevations. This is where the transactions would be occurring. Your bathroom access, your cafe access, transaction window, and the stairs going away. And we're not doing anything to the King Street elevation, leaving it as it is. These are a couple of the renderings that Reese Roberts would basically just pulled out of theirs. They're not exactly depicting what we drew, but they're close enough for the purposes for today. Next round, they'll be a little more abstract. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it for me.
Very good, thank you.
You all want to talk?
Questions, yeah, questions from the board on this phase at this time.
I do have questions.
Good.
Can you talk about the windows that are there now? I think they're all aluminum clad. And they don't really fit are they staying?
So the windows that are there now, I believe Dominion put them in there in 2016. They are pretty new. I think they had board approval. There is a BAR plaque in there.
Well, anyway, are they staying as is?
Those are insulated windows. Right now, we're thinking we'll keep them, we paint them, but keep them and I guess match them for anything that we do new.
So that was my next question. So
Yeah.
the proposal would be some type of clad
Aluminum clad wood for the windows. For the doors,
Yeah, I
for
was gonna
the,
ask about
those
those
would
doors.
not. All the doors that we're doing are going to be the equivalent to a Hope store. we're trying to do the thin black, which if we paint those windows that are there now, it'll look similar if we use the same. So that's the intention.
So go back one,
Yeah.
David. So on the south elevation, the one you're drawing,
Yeah, we'll go back to that.
I was unclear. So that one. So those two doors on the ground floor, those would be some type of aluminum. Is
Glass.
that full glass?
It's intended to be full glass. We're debating whether or not we create a datum line and let the door be here and the glass be there, but it'll be a Hope's window or a Hope's looking window, grand window. Black with a lot of glass. That's why in the plan, we have a little pre-function space to the bathrooms. You're not looking into the bathrooms,
Right.
but you can see for security reasons, we'd rather you see in there. And then the same thing for them. And the French doors.
And then the window is that is that some sort of slider?
It is a
Like I would
slider.
see it like a Wendy's or something?
Yes,
or-
it's not quite like that.
I know it's not, but you know, I mean, I know this is conceptual. I'm just trying to get, because you can see that really clearly. And I want to make sure it feels like it would be in the
100%.
building.
We've done, I've got photographs of some really good transaction windows in parks like this that don't look like McDonald's.
It's a Wendy's, a little nice.
And we were thinking about that too, that we don't want something that's just a roll up. Because you want to, it's a hot day today. They were gonna walk over here. I said, you're crazy. We're gonna drive. So we're gonna have something that you can open and close, but it feels good and is similar to the product that we're using for the doors. So.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't clear on the windows and doors, so that helps a lot. Thank you.
Mr. Metters?
So, when I looked at the building, and I'm on the west elevation and the bottom left window and the bottom right window, there's
They're actually louvers right now.
I'm below the window on the left side of the north window and below the window on the right side of the south window. There's these interesting cracks that go in the stucco that go almost all the way down, almost as if that's been enclosed or it used to be
I think this whole thing used to be storefront.
just storefront.
I think it
As
did.
I was looking at that and
It was.
yeah, interesting.
No, and like I said, this building's lived so many lives. Digging into it, it's been fun just to understand a little bit more about the history of it. But I do believe that ground floor, this tells me there was an awning here at some point. And then there's some holes, there's some places where it looks like it was connected to, but I do think that there is a newer, it's been painted over so many times, we'd have to peel some of the paint off to see the brick discoloration, but I think this brick is different than that brick.
That's the way it reads.
Yeah, me too.
I was just interested. Thank you.
Other questions or commentary at this time on this phase? You're done.
Now that they've got you warmed up. The Gibbs and the city of Charleston are gonna have the opportunity to purchase the White Building from BMOC and incorporate it into their museum. It sounded good, but the only problem with that is the only way a museum can expand is enclosed. If you have a separate building, the project will fail because people will not go from one building to another for museum exhibits. If you have separate building, we have to have separate means of transportation of the art, which was we put on in 2015 to become a accredited museum. We actually had to have a loading door put on the south side of this building that semi trucks back up to, with sealed enclosures and everything. We don't have the space or the ability to do that here. So from moment one, the struggle was, how do we do this? How do we connect these two properties that are both historic, that have two different architectural languages, and do it in such a way that we also, it was never a consideration to be able to build on the ground floor and connect because of Dominion and their lines. They have power lines that run from King to Meeting that create a loop in the lower peninsula. If one side of the city goes down, they can flip these lines running through this property. There's 3 transformers on this property for Dominion. So it meant it had to be a second floor connection, which was absolutely perfect for the Gibbs, because when we did the renovation of the Gibbs, we moved all the art up to the second floor anyway. There's no controlled art on the first floor of the Gibbs. So with that premise, I had the opportunity to go to Italy. I'm still trying to convince Angela that it should be a job expense. But did this over Thanksgiving, haven't been there in 40 years, and just started everywhere we looked. Actually, I didn't even notice that one until I got home. That was just a general picture, but started seeing where this was done a lot to connect dissimilar buildings. Some of them incredibly bad, and some of them very nice. And the predominant success was always with, I'm destroying your clicker, was with a soft arch. But one of the things that we did learn from this is that the distance between them could not be too great. And the distance we have between these 2 buildings actually is fairly large, as it's straddling both properties. So the first premise I knew I had to do is try to reduce this, get it all on the Gibbs, I'm sorry, on the E.B. White site and not on the Gibbs property. Get that span down so that it did not look like a bridge, it looked like a building connection. That was Europe, and I met with Lawrence and BD, and BD said, well, that's all well and good, but find something in the United States, preferably on the East Coast, preferably between 2 historic buildings. And luckily, I had been to this site a few years ago in Chicago, and it hit most of the buttons that I needed to hit. As our example, this is where they linked the 2 buildings together. It's set back from the street. It doesn't pick up, it sort of picks up on the language of one building, not the other. It doesn't create a third language, and that was important for me also on this. The last thing we want to do is try to create yet a third architectural statement. Examples in Charleston, there are some bridged. These 2 buildings are separate, bridged right at the street. Project that y'all are familiar with, up in the neck a little bit more. This one I totally forgot that we had done, ironically, when we did this about 25 years ago. This is connecting the McBee building with Lane Hall and Ashley Hall, set back from the street, and in this case, it's enclosed in the ground floor. But it's been very successful. This was one that I didn't know had happened. And I keep meaning to look. I'm pretty sure that's historic. I know that one is, so I assume this is the link. All this time, though, I always had the Porter's Lodge in mind because I always thought, I've always liked it. I just thought it was a neat thing. This is College of Charleston, the Porter's Lodge, with the 2 side gates and the centerpiece. So with that, we started tackling the problem. I wanted to keep the span only on this property. We had to deal with the issue of transformers, the link to the Gibbs, but beyond the Gibbs, so Gibbs ends here. Then these are additions that were done in 1977, I believe. Right? And move forward. So take over, I'm losing control here.
Lawrence, you take over from Judge.
Clicking. Angela brought up a good point. After all these years, we still call it a clicker. Nobody's come up with a better name than a clicker. No wonder they don't work. So those were just examples that the, well, you're one of the best.
Now it's.
Well, I think it's because it
This
It
guy
finally
behind the
caught up
building.
with all the clicking.
We won't hold it
Yeah,
again.
yeah, just
So,
let it
Okay,
stop
we're-
and then we'll
we're
go
done.
back.
going back. Or forward, looks like. Am I doing it or are you doing it? I don't wanna.
You're not touching anything. I
No,
think it
it's
just
good.
responded to all the previous clicking and
Gotcha,
finally.
gotcha.
That goes to the machine.
Okay, so,
Okay,
all right.
hopefully it'll stop.
Just some example of the simple but elegant detailing on the E.B. White building, and you know, we wanted to bring some of this in, not slavishly, but there's not a whole lot going on. All the attractive part of the building is actually the front. And the sides are fairly plain to that. Keep this in mind, the E.B. White building ends here. Even though there's no demarcation, this was an addition, that's gonna be being torn down. It's amazing that we're a little concerned when this demolition happens. They toothed that together somehow. There is not the slightest crack in it for a building that's not as massively built as this. And yet there's no separation in the stucco whatsoever, so. Everything from there back to be demolished. So this is the existing condition. This is the property line. There's a transformer here for the Gibbs. There's a transformer here for the SC&G. What you see is shaded is what's coming off building. This is where the original Gibbs ends right here. Like that. This is the 1977 edition. So our proposal, 106 feet back, is that we will build a two-story building on the back within the same, pretty much the exact same footprint of what's being demolished, with the exception that we have historically treated the setback from the, instead of where I just explained was flush right there, we're pulling it back 20 inches, and we put an addition on it. We needed the addition we needed property from BMOC to allow us to do this for two reasons. One, we knew we were not going to be connecting into the side of a Category 1 building. Two, this building, as beautiful as it is actually perfect for the Gibbs, because when it was originally built, as far as we can tell, it was one big room, another big room, and at one time a staircase on that corner. That's it. There are no bathrooms in it. There are no elevators, there's no stairwells, there's nothing that we need. But because of this link, we get the bathrooms we need, we'll get the elevator, and between their stair and our stairs, we have 3 of them. We will not need to replicate the second stair for this building. To do this, however, that's sitting right over top of the transformer. We thought we had this figured out, only to find out that SC&G said, no, you're not doing that. So we are going to have them moved out from there, underneath there, and bring both out. One's sitting right about here right now. One's sitting right there. Have to move them. There's a couple sites where we're talking about with Dominion. It hasn't been consummated yet. Second floor plan, this is what's being demolished. Again, you can see it's flush. And the Gibbs. This is where we're setting it back. And we're coming straight across. Now, again, for this to happen for a museum, you can't get people to, they don't know where you are in the museum. When you're going through, I don't care where you are, the large museums, one thing you don't do to them is funnel them down to a narrow walk. It needs to be wide enough that art can be hung in that piece as they're moving through. Roof plan existing, roof plan proposed. Mechanical for this, there's nowhere, we don't own any site when this transaction happens. We won't own any place to put the mechanical. And mechanical for a museum is not like mechanical for a regular building. It is a very large chiller. It's 6 or 7 or 8 feet tall. We are going to create an enclosure back behind on the roof of that building there. And because the floor ceiling of the EB White building is 15 feet inside, it's been dropped twice over the years. But because of that, we had an excess amount of space by dropping the ceiling of this portion down to 9 or 10 and cutting out the back of what would have been a hip, which would have been problematic anyway, creating a fake mansard, if you will. We can put the chiller in there surrounded by acoustical panels and nobody will see it in here. So this is the way it looks now. That's our that transformer up there. That's the corner of the property. Corner of the property. So we're doing this in 2 panels, 2 separate building. This one extends over and then the link. This is how we keep now. Again, it's tucked behind there. When you actually look down the driveway, which I think a perspective is going to come up that you'll see. You see a archway, a large archway, and a small archway. This is not exactly the way I started drawing it. I had done something slightly different on the arches. But I kept going back to the Porter's Lodge and I said, I really like the way that looks. Well, in looking at it even further, the irony was one of the books from Charleston, it was in the Architects of Charleston, said that because E.B. White did the 2 wings on the College of Charleston building behind the cistern, he did the ironwork. He's reputed to have done the Porter's Lodge. So it's kind of ironic that I said, all right, well, I'm gonna take I had arches more like this. I said, nah, this is the way he would have been thinking. This is the way I want to be thinking, and I like it. So we actually raised that arch higher to get the same feel. Mine was 10 feet tall and 12 feet. It's 10 by 12, but like this. I went to measure theirs, it's 10 feet wide and 11 foot 11. So we're off by 1 inch from the way. But really like the way that worked. This is the walkway down the side of the Gibbs, which serves for some people as part of the cemetery walk. That's uninterrupted. That this is space, but step back a good bit from the, and we can go back to that if you need to look at it. Set back from the back of the Gibbs, the original Gibbs. Put a soft arch up top. Again, the softening of that we thought helped bridge that. That is a set of windows. It's a beautiful view looking straight across at the small assembly hall building on this on the Circuit Congregations site. Our property will end here. You saw what they were doing there. We're going to keep this addition. There was a stairwell. We obviously have to. We originally thought we would get rid of it and take the building back. It fits well enough. We're keeping it stairwell, and that ironwork fence will become the exit for the Gibbs off the front. On the north side, there were 2 windows here. They were taken out. There are 3 vaults, one down here, one right there, one right there. $70,000 and we can get them out of there and put the windows back. We're taking a hard look at that. Inside the vaults, there are vaults. They really took our money. So that would be the only change we'd be making on that side of the building. This portion here is facing the park. The park is going to plant right up against the building. So there was no need or desire to put any windows on this facade. And that's also the bathrooms and the elevator. It made sense. There, you saw their coverage, what they're going to be doing. You can see how that, if you could see that chiller, it's in here like this. Okay, It's lower down on the back side, on the other side. On the back side, this is under discussion. We thought, we didn't know what they were doing with their planning. We thought everything would be low. We thought that was a lot of wall. Now we're finding their stuff is gonna be about this tall already. I'm proposing down the road that we eliminate them also. They plan to solidly espalier like they were shown with the hedges on this. There's where they were plugging in those two gates that they mentioned. These are in two separate planes here, and this is the walkway to give. So that's the property line right there. Gives you a better view of it. This one is a walkthrough. This one is not. These would be closed. The park didn't want us looking down into the park. We obviously, if we're hanging art in that as a corridor, we can't have too many windows. We can have ones on the other side. Again, this restudy that treatment will come out of our discussions with the city and the two groups and yourself. I'm not committed to any of this because what I've sort of done is created the false history of something that doesn't even exist yet. So in my mind, it may be better to leave some of this blank, figure out some of the way the street is. The south side, there's a good chance we will bring this window back. It would have been taken out about the 60s or so when they made the front room up there, and that was their teller window that you go in. And so they took that one out. There is no fireplace there or there, but the chimney's still there, and all that'll stay. This is recessed back in, which I can go back to the plan if you don't remember. And this is the extension of the building connection. There's a lot of depth in here. There's a 10-inch difference between the two properties. It'll be very subtle in that length. But we also need to get all the utilities through there between the two buildings, because this building can't support its own sprinkler system, its own communication systems, its own chill pipe connections, boiler pipe. So all that will happen here and here, which is the reason we have the attic space in there to be able to get the connection between these two buildings. Oh, and
Oh, that was the timer. It shut you off after a while.
Okay.
Okay.
Just like practice for one night, you know. Well, it somehow it flipped to the very somewhere else. Can you find it? One time, or I will.
Yeah, there it is.
There you go. So that's, and again, you can, when you're walking by, you can see the other arch develop in there. As you put in the driveway, it'll do a good job. This is looking straight across, see through there. There's a very significant hedgerow that Ben Lenhart's been working on and grooming right here, podocarpus. We had them turned on, we turned them back off because landscape covers up architecture and you don't want to see it, but that will remain. So again, you won't be reading this like this. And there's also the large elm trees here. Two of them, I believe, still will remain. So they will not read as like you see it here. But again, for our purposes, we turned it off. So that we're not showing any interior plans of the building yet. But like I said, the beauty of this is it's all cobbled up in the little office spaces, and we will be taking it back as near as we can tell. This was not SCNG, this was the gas company. And it was some very wealthy fat men who sat around a huge table smoking cigars, patting themselves in the back. You know, there was no working offices in here that day. It was just these big spaces and that's beautiful because now the Gibbs will open that up. The moldings inside most of them are still intact. They're beautiful. It's going to be a very good use of a Category 1 building that will become public.
Questions on, or discussion from the board on this phase or from staff? Mr. Bello.
So I have two questions about the link here, Joe. So, you said it's a driveway. Is it cars gonna be going back and forth? Are people
No,
walking in there?
we were told they were gonna be driving through, so long as the transformers are on this side, they won't be driving through. That park doesn't want to drive through. However, they want to be using it. They will be, I'm assuming, for food trucks and things like that, that they can back them
So that
up
will be
in,
access.
lawn equipment trucks and everything. So it'll be a dead end driveway up to this.
So no one, like, you're not gonna drive a food truck through that, are you?
No, not.
Correct. I don't think it'll
Yeah,
fit.
not a
It won't
It's only
be,
2 feet wide.
no way.
It would be a delivery drive.
delivery parking driveway, but not drive under.
Okay, just trying to understand the use a
Yeah,
little bit.
right.
And then this is more of a question, I know we'll talk about this as a board in a minute, but you set up the arch to be off center from between the two buildings, you stepped it. Is there a reason for that to where? Follow you, you went,
You could go fast just back and forth.
you talked about, Porter's Lodge, and it makes all perfect sense to me. But it strikes me as, like, why didn't you just center it between the two
Well,
buildings?
because driveways, I don't know the exact width on it, actually, 12 feet or so, it's not very wide. So we couldn't get.
So this is the next plan. And it's okay, I'm just asking because
no.
it doesn't, like, when I look at the elevations, I'm like, why wouldn't that be in the middle?
Right. I
Right?
mean, you couldn't develop all that within that space. Can you find the?
Look at the elevation where you have the.
Well, I'm looking for the ground, and we don't have to get to next sheet before this one, there.
There you go.
Why wouldn't, see where the arrow is? Why wouldn't that arrow is kind of in the middle, why wouldn't the arch be? Why didn't you just slide that page south? Follow?
Yes, I do.
Because you've got room, I mean, why wouldn't you just?
Because this is the property line between the two of them. And this will not be able to support anything. This is where all the lines are running under. So this will be the structure that span will be bearing from there to there. What we try to do is create enough room to develop the feel that we wanted.
Right.
But it's not something, and again, with this one not being open, anyway, it's not something you need to appreciate all that, but when you go down there, it has a soft feeling. This being pushed back on purpose, else the
Yeah,
other
I
end
get
as
all
well
that.
is
Yeah.
to save the window.
All that makes sense to me. I just want
I
to
get it.
grab that one piece and slide it down. But you can't because of where the drive,
Right.
where the gates are, that wall.
Right.
It's fixed, it can't move. Okay.
But this is what I was trying to say, deliberately not running that straight through on that. This was to develop.
I got.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand it. Thank you.
Further questions this time, James?
Right, Joe. And I'm just thinking about the integration of the three different plans, and this is just looking at the graphics more than anything else, but looking at ways some of the trees are laid out adjacent to the building, and it looks like, a quarter of the tree is not going to be able to grow out because it's actually in the building. So I'm just wondering what gets modified to make this work?
You're planting the trees within, what about here, 42 inches or something, 48 inches? They're planting the base of these trees very tight up against the building. So of course, when they're drawing a tree, I can't answer to that, but that's how they're rendering.
Just wondering how that's working.
The trees have been dug and they've gone into these things called air pots. And so they're being actually, they've been root rooted and now they're in air pots. So they're actually being, their roots are being dissolved.
Just as a historic preservation question,
Because there's very unique spots throughout the whole site.
wouldn't that potentially hold too much water and damage a category 1 building?
We're going through great lengths on protecting the foundation for the EV white building.
It's under discussion because we do have that concern. There are root barriers and we can moisture, we already know there's rising damp in the basement of this. But I don't think they're going to contribute to that. If anything, it might help that out, soak some of that up, but yeah. we will have to they will have to deal with the root barriers and the waterproofing to help us out.
So I want to go back to my, the picture that shows, can't find the page number on here.
Oh, they also
This
placeholder. So
The
go to
composite
the
site plan.
site plan.
Talking about their presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm just,
Well, you know, grapes are different from regular trees. They don't,
They're gonna-
Yeah, they can grow anywhere.
right, they can grow more vertical and not have a big canopy over it.
and again, it's just looking at the graphic, but
Right.
whoever wants to answer this, but you look at the trees adjacent or on the north side of the EB White building and on the, especially the north side of the. And again, it's just presentation, but you know, when you're looking at it, you're
Yeah.
going like, how does that work? And that makes me think about the, you know, the integration of these three plans and, either good communication or lack of communication between the groups about how all those details are being worked out, which brings me ultimately to the 174 question about, you know, the pre-design conference meeting. Whether or not, you know, that would help work out all of these details. So that's where I was going with that. So, thank you.
Further questions or board comment at this time? Seeing none, thank you to the applicant. Is there any members of the public who wish to be heard on this agenda?
Anna Catherine Alexander with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Preservation Society appreciated the chance to discuss this proposal with the project team, and we're supportive of efforts to create an urban park and central connection between King and Meeting Streets, enhancing the public realm. This will be a highly visible component of our public landscape, and it is in the community's interest to get this right. Our comments primarily focus on the proposed addition, linking the two significant civic buildings and its relationship to the garden. The Gibbs Museum and 141 Meeting Street are two of the most architecturally distinct buildings on this stretch of Meeting. And as we know, 141 Meeting is among a select group of buildings rated category 1 in the city. The proposal to connect the two buildings is starting in a positive place by largely minimizing impacts to historic fabric on either building. However, to more sensitively engage with 141 Meeting Street, the roof line of the addition should be tucked beneath the eave of the historic building. We also feel further study of the addition's massing and architectural direction is warranted in favor of a simpler, more unified design. As proposed, the dual masses result in a complicated and asymmetrical condition from both Meeting Street and the interior garden perspectives. The varied roof forms, arched openings, and fenestration patterns could be simplified for a more harmonious expression that is compatible but differentiated from the historic buildings. Further, we are concerned by the extensive use of fixed shutters in place of window openings on both sides of the connecting structure, as well as on the new rear addition. Where possible, the use of false windows, blank walls, and closed gates should be minimized on civic buildings fronting public spaces. We encourage study toward an approach that allows the use of true window openings and promotes greater engagement with downtown's newest park. And lastly, on the King Street side, the proposed rehabilitation of 174 King is positive. We would, however, encourage a lighter touch to altering existing fenestration patterns unless supported by evidence, particularly on the south and east elevations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Further public comment?
Is there any more public?
Yeah, is there any more public comment? I was confused as to whether Ms. Mack was and Mr. Lenhart were going to say something in this portion of the meeting.
She'd
That's-
like to respond
To respond to,
to the public comment.
no, that's not the appropriate time for response to public comment by the applicant. City staff comments and recommendations.
Sure, and city staff comments are gonna be made in the groups of the three items then before we get to the recommendations. With the American Gardens Park, staff support the design of the American Gardens Park. It provides a new landscape link between King and Meeting via the Crepe Myrtle LA. The LA, King Street Fountain Plaza, Gibbs Fountain Plaza, and Great Lawn are well-proportioned spaces that will be an asset to the city. Staff support the design of the proposed gates and fences associated with the park. Next is 141 Meeting Street or the EB White building. At 141 Meeting Street, staff support the height, scale, and mass of the new addition and bridge link between the historic building and the Gibbs main building. The form of the proposed addition is deferential to the historic EB White building as it attaches to the historic structure only where the current addition, previously approved for demolition, already exists. The rear corners of the historic structure are revealed to allow the original mass to be understood. The new addition is also subordinate to the ridgeline and roof mass of the historic building. And because it is placed at the rear of the structure, the proposed addition does not dominate the EB White building nor the Gibbs Museum of Art, which it adjoins. On the north elevation, staff support the two new wood windows that match scale and appearance of the existing. On the south elevation, staff support the second-story aluminum window and ground floor doors of the new addition and building link that help differentiate the new addition from the historic EB White structure. Staff require further study of the architectural direction of the new addition east and west facades to allow 141 Meeting to remain visually dominant on Meeting Street. Specifically, the primary Meeting Street facade, also known as the east elevation link, has too many arcuated features which detract from the architectural expression of the EB White building. Staff would like to see all second floor fenestration to be rectangular in form so as not to compete with the EB White building. Staff also prefer that the public portal to the gardens be the only arch where the hierarchy is appropriate as it indicates public access to the gardens. The segmented arch to the left of the main portal would be best as a simple rectangular opening. As a mirror to the east elevation, staff has similar comments for the west elevation link, requesting that all second-story fenestration be rectangular in nature and the aforementioned opened archway adjacent to the Gibbs main building also be rectangular. Again, this issue of hierarchy. Staff support the moving of the transformers for the benefit of the project. At preliminary stage, staff require further study of the specific material and design of the proposed screen for the transformers, as mesh may not be the most suitable option. 171 King Street. The BAR large submittal form does state a pre-design conference with the city architect or preservation officer to review the design is required for large projects prior to application for conceptual review. And there was no preview meeting for this particular portion of the larger application. Staff support the addition of window boxes on the west or King Street elevation. Staff also support the addition of 5 new windows similar to the existing one on the north elevation. Staff do not support the changes proposed to the south and east elevations. The changes to the east elevation substantially change the historic character of that facade. Staff would prefer that all existing windows remain windows. The replacement of the existing door with a new door is reasonable. The addition of a new window on the second floor matching the character of the existing is also reasonable in maintaining the character of the building rather than the proposed door on that second story. The proposed balcony changes the historic character of the structure and is not appropriate. On the second story of the south elevation, staff does not approve the new door and balcony. They are not in keeping with the historic structure. Staff prefer the second story structure has 6 windows that match existing windows and no balcony. On the ground floor, staff would like to see the window closest to King Street, which is next to the revamped doorway, remain instead of being bricked over. Staff approve of the addition of a pass-through window. Staff prefer that the existing window near the east elevation remain and that the new door is placed where there is currently no opening. Staff support the removal of the non-historic exterior stair on south elevation. And that's a lot to take in. All right, so staff conditions for approval. This is going to be very similar to what was already said previously with the demo, but notice that the word deconstruction has been changed to construction. There's some of the concerns that have been brought up. All construction work is to consider adjacent or nearby structures, protection and monitoring thereof. If any foundation work involving significant vibration, such as driven piles, may be reasonably suspected to be a threat to the historic or new adjacent or nearby structures, a program must be put in place addressing how these structures be protected and monitored. Copy of this protection and monitoring plan to be transmitted to staff for review prior to work. At 141 Meeting, staff required changes to east and west facades from arcuated forms to rectangular ones as outlined in the context and analysis. Condition 3, if board approves 174 King, staff require changes to south and east elevations, also as outlined in context and analysis. Staff recommendation is threefold. Conceptual approval of the American Gardens Park site plan with board and staff conditions. Conceptual approval of 141 Meeting Street addition with board and staff conditions, and denial of 174 King Street.
Thank you, BD.
Sure.
Any response from the applicant?
Thank you so much for your consideration. This particular link and bringing the two buildings together to use for exhibition purposes is extremely important to the Gibbs. Our desire is to make the E.B. White building open to the public, and this is the way that we would do that. As Joe indicated to you, our desire with this building and the purpose of it is to turn it from a space that was used for offices to a space that is used for a museum. Museum, of course, artwork is not, sunlight is not a favorable thing to artwork. We try to protect the pieces as much as possible from sun, and therefore the opportunity to create spaces that have minimal windows or are windows that are revealed on the outside but are not necessary on the inside is going to be very important to us so that we can maximize linear feel. That said, we will be extremely respectful of the E.B. White building as we have been with the Gibbs Museum of Art itself, and come up with interesting ways to make that happen, particularly on the second floor. I also appreciate the fact that y'all are respectful of our needs to remain an accredited museum with the American Alliance of Museums. This, of course, is extremely important to us because it allows us to borrow works of art from other major institutions like the Met or Chicago or Boston. And it also allows us to lend works of art to those institutions as well. Having an appropriate loading dock area that then allows us to move through the institution, the existing institution, and then carry works through our freight elevator into the new building will be extremely important to us for the protection of the works of art and to secure that we will be provided with these loans based on our new facilities report that we have to provide museums whenever we borrow a work of art. So thank you for your consideration. I hope to show you this marvelous new space sometime in the near future.
Thank you, Mrs. Mack. And I gather Mr. Schmidt.
So I guess I'd like to respond to, I'm very much in favor of the Porter's Lodge, the concept of the three arches. One, because it was E.B. White, two, because it's soft. I just don't agree with staff on flattening off that side arch because that one with the gate, because that is a way into the park. When there are not, and when there aren't, there isn't an event going on and it is for meeting somebody, there will be people who, that, as I understand it, they're gonna be taking up that asphalt, making that driveway a lot more attractive and permeable, I believe. And those gates are gonna have to, will be remain closed except when they're taking large items into the park, not driving through, but taking them through. Because those gates are 5 feet wide. That can't be used for pedestrians. So that side gate will be actually useful. And I just feel like flattening that down next to that gracious 12-foot arch, I don't really see that. And not willing to not agree with staff. I also don't understand. I feel like that second floor window being softened makes it more clear that it wasn't part of the original design of E.B. White. It's a wood window, so we'll have I just have a difference of opinion and feel strong enough to bring it up. So.
It's fine, Mr. Schmidt. Further response from the
First of all, I want to apologize for not meeting with you personally at 174 King. I think we crossed paths and assumed other people had already done that. So I apologize for that. also wanted to point out, so the south and east elevations are the elevations in question, and I think that's mainly due to the fact that there's balconies on them. And we probably should have done a better job of expressing the examples, the case studies of those on other buildings around the area, especially on the back sides facing the garden areas of these houses or buildings, commercial buildings and houses. That being said, we do think that the south and the east elevation functionally and even aesthetically are more successful with the modifications that we've proposed, but obviously we're willing to reduce some of the fenestration, if that is the request of the DAR. Thank you for considering.
Thank you. Okay. Board discussion.
I think whenever you endeavor to create any sort of hyphenated connection between two of the most notable structures in the stretch of Main Street, as Ms. Alexander noted, you're in for a hell of a ride. And I think that it's a very delicate balance to do something that's complementary to both structures. It does not detract from the excellent architecture of either structure, but is yet simple and well composed, logical, and not apologetic. And I'm afraid this version does not pass that test. I agree with staff comments on the linkage between the two buildings almost incredibly accurately. And I think, regarding 174 King, the east balcony is probably not that objectionable to me, but because it's going to be minimally visible from the public right away. But other changes to fenestration are just sort of monkeying around with stuff because it feels like it doesn't matter so much, but it kind of does because it's a Category 3 structure. The park itself is dandy. I am also a little concerned with how close some of the plantings are getting to the historic structures, but I'm not even really sure if that's technically in our purview because we don't have purview over landscape itself. I agree with staff's analysis and conditions, although I'm not really sure that, I'll see what y'all think. I would not really feel comfortable with any form of approval at 141 at this time.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think about the project overall and the goals of the project. I mean, I'm a supporter of the project. I think it's going to be a great addition to the city. Understand the connection the gives to the adjacent building for usage. I think that's all great. But there's a lot of information that came, and I really got the sense that maybe between the organizations, it wasn't all completely put together. 3 different presentations, which is fine, but I felt like, and maybe it's driven by the detailing of the attachment. Maybe it's driven, even though the garden may not be in our purview, the plantings may not be in our purview. There's still something that needs to be adjusted for it to actually work. But I mean, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be great. But I almost feel like there needs to be a little more coordination between all of the groups and teams for what's happening with the total project before it moves forward. Even though in the big picture, I'm grateful it's going to happen.
Further board comments?
Well, I think first we're kind of overlooking the fact that this is an amazing project, right? This has been a parking lot as long as I can remember. We're going to have this wonderful park. It's fantastic. I think the design is awesome for the park. I'm just imagining what that's going to be, and it's going to be a great thing for the city. We're kind of jumping into the criticism like I always do. So that is a great thing. I know I'm not picking on y'all. That's what I do. And also the fact that we're going to have an opportunity now as the public to be able to be inside the EBY building. Last time I was in there, I paid an electric bill like 40 years ago. So maybe like 40 years, but it was a while ago. So this is great. This is a wonderful opportunity. So I don't want to diminish that. A couple things, I'll break down my comments briefly, and I agree with the city staff's comments. I have no comments about the park other than I think it's great. I love it. I love the idea of a connection to Gateway Walk. It always sort of has stopped at the Gibbs because there's no way to get through there. One thing, this is out of our purview, but to me, there's maybe an opportunity to connect from the park north across to the new Four Seasons little alleyway that's happening there. I don't know if there's any way, that's not your property, so just asking, there might be a way to do a path. Because I've just been in the meetings for the Four Seasons, they're gonna have a little alleyway.
We talked.
Okay, so you're way ahead of me. So if there's any way, I mean, that'd be great. So again, the park, I think, I don't have any issues. On 174 King, I'm not as concerned about the alteration to the east facade because it used to be the back of the building historically, now it's gonna front park. So I'm not as bothered by some of the changes. I am concerned, you can tell, about pass-through window. The way it's drawn now, it doesn't feel complementary to a historic building. So I think the changes could happen. I just don't, I think more study needs to happen. Another ask, it's very frustrating to me to see those terrible louvers on King. They've been there again as long as I can remember. I know you've got a bathroom there, but the windows are high. You could still have a window and then have shutters with louvers so that light could come in when you're in the bathroom. And then when I walk down the street, I don't see, I think they're aluminum plastic shutters. So we can't force you to do that. You can leave it like it is, but it seems to me you're doing all this work and we're still gonna have not a great facade on King. So I'd ask you to look at that. And then on 141, so I appreciate the approach and I like the arch idea for Porter, you know, to relate to Porter's Lodge or something, but you've got two very strong historic buildings, very formal. Beaux-Arts for the Gibbs, I guess, federal, classical, I don't know, but it's just amazing formal buildings. And then we've got this link it's off center and there's steps and you put an arch in there that's off center. It to me, it just doesn't work. It makes it contrary to the idea that it should recede. I'm not saying it needs to be plain or not be attractive, and that's why I think the arch idea is good. I just think that's why I said, why don't you just center it? You know, then we see an arch and then it's simple glass up there or whatever. So I just think some of it is the approach is good, but I just think it ought to be, you ought to step back, restudy that. I personally don't think you need a pitched roof on it. I think a flat roof would solve 90% of the issues. You could still hide the mechanical and anyway. So I just think that link ought to be simplified and still have an arch. It can still be some kind of expression, but the approach could be handled differently. I do not like to see fake shutters. I saw that one is a reception area. You could put two windows in there. I think you can study that and solve. I just never want to see fake shutters on a building if I can help it. So anyway, so I agree with staff. I think the comments were good. I do appreciate the effort, but those are my comments.
Further board comments?
I have no comments because everyone on the board is much smarter than me when it comes to architecture, design, engineering, et cetera. I think that my only concern is that the submission was not complete. That the application states that we followed through these prior approvals or reviews, and that wasn't done so. So considering that, and also I'm not the biggest fan of splitting decisions on a single application. I think it would probably be most appropriate for us to defer the entire application so that each member of the applicants can go back to their respective groups and take into consideration board and staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And I'm actually going to second what you have said procedurally, not so much on the application, but just the concern that all of these pieces, including the reference to BMOC potentially selling the building, but that hasn't happened. That's okay. That's not a condition. We're not saying it's part of our purview, but some evidence that maybe we need to pull these elements together to make sure that they speak clearly, that all the project participants are on the same page so that we are confident that when it's executed, particularly in regards to the E.B. White building, when you're talking about such a significant hyphen, that it is on really because of the structure, the other structures that are involved, is important. And we don't we need to make sure that we as a board have gotten it right. I don't, in terms of the substantive comments, the only thing that I would say is I'm not as critical of 174 King, perhaps the staff and others have been. I'm sympathetic to the fact that in this whole corridor, I think this building was probably subject to the Great Fire of 1862. The result of that is that you have a building that is a hodgepodge, as are many buildings in that district. I actually think doing something to make the building more coherent, which we agree it is not right now, is good, even if we have disagreements about the amount of fenestration. And I think the plan actually does, for 174, does make it a more coherent building, even if we have concerns about it being a grade 3 building. As Mr. Bello said, frankly, we're working with a facade that is becoming a public right of way after not really being one for a long time. So I'm a little more sympathetic on 174 King. Be that as it may, the easiest way to not besmirch the applicant with a denial of any component of this is to take the very large amount of feedback that they have received and do a deferral. I think that actually does justice to everybody rather than rushing through it or stamping, no, this element is denied, or particularly in regards to the archway and hyphen, saying that we've prohibited any particular form of that at this point, because I think we agree it is so preliminary that the applicant should have the benefit of reworking it based on what we've effectively given them as a preliminary decision. So for that reason, and not dividing it into 3 approvals, denials, or deferrals, which may in fact compound the applicant's problem. A blanket deferral would serve the interest of everybody, I think, other than unfortunately time. Further discussion.
I agree with that.
That makes sense.
I'll make a motion to defer this project with board and staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Bello. It's in proper order. Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Mr. White?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Brown?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Bello?
Yeah, in favor.
Myself, yay in favor. Thank you to the applicant. We look forward to working with you through the issues raised about the deferral. And hope you can appreciate that we think a deferral is better than a denial of any applicant. Thank you so much.
So